morning of June 10, 1991, 11-year-old Jaycee Duggard was kidnapped on her way to the bus stop in her hometown of South Lake Tahoe, California. Jaycee Lee Duggard was a fifth grader at Tahoe Valley Elementary School in South Lake Tahoe, California. She lived at home with her mother, Terry, her stepfather, Carl Probin, and her 2-year-old baby sister, Shayna. In the same Northern California area, Philip Garrido was released from prison on parole just 3 years before, in 1988. Garrido had been imprisoned for kidnapping and raping 25-year-old Katie Hall. In prison, he met his wife, Nancy, who had been a prison visitor. The two married, and he was released 11 years into his 50-year sentence. The two moved in with Garrido's mother in Antioch, California, a town less than 200 miles away from South Lake Tahoe, with many registered sex offenders. On the morning of June 10, 1991, Duggard's innocence was robbed of her when she was kidnapped by Nancy and Philip Garrido. Jaycee was on her way to the bus stop just seconds from her home when a white Ford drove past her. The car reversed quickly, and stepfather Carl Probin heard the door open and his stepdaughter scream. He ran after her, and when he couldn't catch the car, he called the police, who were immediately aided by the FBI.
911, this is 911. On Tiger Boulevard, the washout. My daughter was just kidnapped. Top of the hill with a gray Ford. A man and woman in the car. I'm feeling total panic. Total panic about how tragic this is. It's like,
What had happened to Jaycee had been witnessed by her schoolmates about to board the school bus.
Jaycee was immediately placed in sheds and tents in the backyard compound of Philip Garrido's home in Antioch, California. For 18 years, Jaycee faced a life full of extreme sexual and mental abuse. The first few days of her captivity was in handcuffs with only a towel as clothes, and within the first few hours of abduction, 11-year-old Jaycee had to shower with her captor. She was forced to change her name to Alyssa and was forbidden from saying her real name. Philip would rape Jaycee every day, sometimes having day-long rape sessions, which he called runs. Within a run, Jaycee was forced to comply to Philip's wants of dress-up, reviewing pornographic material, dancing over him, providing handjobs, oral sex, and vaginal intercourse multiple times. If she fought back, Philip threatened to use the stun gun on her, the same object he used at her kidnapping, or threatened that he would sell her or subject her to sex with his dog or wife. However, the motivation for her kidnapping became apparent. Philip wanted to impregnate Jaycee and create a family with his wife to try to mask his ugly need for intercourse. Once a week for 3 years, Philip would rape Jaycee in an attempt to impregnate her. She eventually became pregnant at the age of 14. She gave birth to her first child, a baby girl named Starlet, in the backyard shed with no medical help and all alone. She used a medical television show as reference. After Starlet's birth, Philip said he wanted to be more of a family. He continued to rape her until she got pregnant a second time at age 17, giving birth to baby girl Angel. Once her second daughter was conceived, Philip stopped having sex with Jaycee. Yet, Jaycee's abuse was also caused by mental manipulation from Garrido. He would feed her lies about her family's lack of love for her, so she didn't feel like she had anyone to flee to. Philip told her he had a sex problem and that she was the solution, so he wouldn't abuse anyone else, claiming that she wasn't only helping him, but helping the world. Garrido also declared that God was helping him with his problem, sourcing the Bible every time he sexually assaulted Jaycee by saying it was the last time he would do so. He told her she needed him and had to protect him. But the most painful manipulation was that of Jaycee's children, who grew up being told that Nancy was their mom and Alyssa was their sister. All 3 girls were kept in seclusion, and Jaycee homeschooled her daughters, even with her own lack of education. Starlet and Angel were aged 11 and 15 when Jaycee was rescued. Over the 18 years of her horrid abduction and captivity, Jaycee Duggard never once made any attempt to escape.
Garrido's parole officer searched Nancy and Philip's home only a few times, and despite walking past Jaycee's compound, he never suspected anything. Garrido was not closely monitored, and no one thought it odd that he associated with 3 adolescent girls, considering his criminal history. The horrors that Jaycee Lee Duggard experienced brought light to the flaws of our current parole system, as well as the leniency our justice system has for sex offenders. Philip Garrido was not the only wrongly released sex offender who was given liberal parole. Eddie Barreras was released early from his prison sentence and without strict parole proceeded to kidnap an 11-year-old girl. John Evander Cooey and Roger Paul Bentley were also released early from prison and after being given multiple chances to become changed men, murdered 9-year-old Jessica Lunsford in 2005. And very recently, right here in Long Beach, California, Eric Lee, former rapist, was found managing a Los Angeles child care center. This was investigated by local news, not police, and Lee's parole officer had known he'd gotten a job but was unaware of what it was. Not surprisingly, parole officers have been greatly criticized for their lack of control. Garrido would not even have been released from prison had his release not been dependent upon a psychiatric evaluation because Garrido was a master manipulator. Duggard and others argue that early prison release should consider a criminal's past and other warning signs should be monitored. Even after his release, parole officers failed to discipline Garrido's action when he tested positive for methamphetamines, contacted a former rape victim, and was seen with young girls in his yard.
Jaycee's rescue came while Philip Garrido was handing out religious flyers with his 2 daughters, and a female UC Berkeley cop became suspicious and asked them to return. Upon their return, the daughters were very quiet, and Philip admitted to having previously been a registered sex offender, but he spoke nothing of Jaycee. The security officer had maternal instincts that something was off and called Garrido's parole officer to talk about his daughters. But while on the phone, the parole officer said Philip had no record of having children. The parole officer told Garrido to bring his whole family to his next meeting, and he complied, bringing Jaycee as well. They were all separated and questioned. Philip admitted the truth about abducting Jaycee. However, Jaycee, initially struck with fear, said her name was Alyssa and said what Garrido had brainwashed her to say if this ever occurred. Luckily, the police had known the truth and told her she was safe, so she wrote down her real name. On August 26, 2009, after 18 years, Jaycee Lee Duggard was free. Later that day, Jaycee was reunited with her mother, Terry Probin.
You're at the office, the phone rings.
Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And then it was disbelief. I thought, no, you're joking. Don't do this to me. This is not funny. And I remember you shouting. Oh, yeah. Found her! My daughter! And I was crying, when you're crying and you can't speak. I just said, come quick. I remember saying, come quick. And I remember telling you, I'm coming, baby, I'm coming. And then I said something about having babies. I didn't mean I had babies. I meant I had babies. I didn't know what to say. It was like unbelievable.
And when you heard she had daughters?
Babies. Oh, I'm thinking, babies, okay. I can deal with this.
At the trial of Philip and Nancy Garrido, although they initially claimed themselves not guilty, Philip was found guilty to 1 account of kidnapping and 13 accounts of sexual assault. He received 431 years to life in prison. Nancy pleaded guilty to 1 count of kidnapping and 1 count of rape by force. She received 36 years to life. Many therapists had to work with Jaycee and her 2 kids with explaining the truth to them about their parents. According to sources, they fully understand and accept it now. Jaycee now lives with her 2 kids in California, adjusting to her new life of freedom. She wrote a book called A Stolen Life, a memoir, detailing her harrowing 18-year experience. She and her mom also founded the Jaycee Foundation to help those who have also faced child abduction. Recently, Jaycee tried to sue the government for the failure of Philip Garrido's parole officers to keep him in jail prior to her kidnapping. However, she was denied.
It is important that we move forward with our parole system and that we revise how we deal with sex offenders. Megan's Law provides public information on sex offenders, but if we do nothing to discipline or restrict those sex offenders, the public knowledge is useless. It is vital that we change something to prevent future horrors so that another's innocence isn't robbed as Jaycee Lee Duggard's was.